First, however, I'd like to ask a blessing upon the proceedings for this evening. O gracious Heavenly Father, we come before you this evening with gratitude for so many provisions that we have been blessed with. We thank you especially for our lovely community, and we ask that you would give us wisdom and courage to do the right things as we seek to do the public's business this evening. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. Pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. I call this meeting of the Spotsylvania County Planning Commission to order. We have 100% attendance, thus a quorum. Announcements.
On the planning update for Wednesday, June 3rd, we have the vote for the Ely's Ford Road Telecommunications Tower. We had tentatively scheduled Hill Farm rezoning, but that one is not yet ready to move forward, so we'll push it one more meeting. And so those are the end of the announcements.
Thank you. Next is the review of and approval of the minutes of the meeting of April 27. Everyone should have had a chance to review them, make any corrections they may have. Any comments, questions? Very well, then let's proceed to a vote. A vote yes is in favor of approval of the minutes. The minutes are approved with 5 yeses and 2 abstentions.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I just wanted to remind you, I think that there's an addition to the agenda.
I wanted to also add to the agenda this evening under, do we do this whenever, right?
Yeah, you can do it now. Just
Okay.
make a motion and
Okay.
vote to add it to
The
the
chair
agenda.
will entertain a motion then to add to the agenda a closed session for the discussion of pending litigation against the county and in reference to planning commission efforts.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. And then so the plan is to do it after we have our work session. Thank you. Vote yes, and please vote. A vote yes is in favor of the motion. It is unanimous. Thank you very much. Any other unfinished business? Seeing none, then we'll proceed to the first item, a plat, P150002.
We've received a preliminary plat for Legends of Chancellorsville. This is a follow-up to the rezoning, which was approved a few months ago in the Chancellor voting district. 217 single-family detached lots on about 1,100 acres off of north of Route 3 and Ely's Ford Road. This is going before the Technical Review Committee on June 4th, and that meeting will be at about 10 o'clock in the morning. Any planning commissioners that are interested in attending, please let Leon Hughes know by June 1st so that he can make arrangements and let you know the exact time.
Thank you. And then a review of P150001.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a preliminary plat for P150001. It was originally came in under Courthouse Commons subdivision. I've placed a memo at Charles' desk where the applicant has requested to change the name. It'll be the Village at Courthouse Commons. This is just going to be one section of several to come. This property was subject to a recent rezoning for mixed use. The current plat is for 33.8 acres, which will be subdivided into 97 detached lots, 60 attached lots, for a total of 157. The detached lots will range in size from 6,000 to 9,000 square feet, and the attached lots will range in size from 1,920 to 2,720 square feet. The public roads will be throughout the development, in addition to private alleys that will serve as garage access for most of the detached lots and all of the attached lots. All of the lots will be served by public water and sewer. And there is a exception request as part of this as well for the Planning Commission to consider. Currently, our ordinance has a lot standard that single-family detached lots contain a minimum of 10,000 square feet of buildable area. This is area that does not include any wetlands, RPA, or steep slopes. Staff is currently working on an amendment to reduce this number to 1,000 square feet so that it's consistent with the mixed-use ordinance requirements. And so that is part of this request as you approve the preliminary plat, because most of the attached lots that are down here would need that exception. And as we noted in your Planning Commission packet, this request was sent to the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation due to the proximity of the Nye River dam break inundation zone. And we did hear from DCR yesterday, and they determined that this section of the development is outside of the inundation zone, so it should be acceptable for at least this limited section. As the future sections come in with their preliminary plats, those will be forwarded to DCR as well for review and comment. And that's my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
It was such a thorough presentation that I don't think we have any.
I have a question.
All right, Gary.
Buildable area for the proposed change, assuming that that excludes floodplains, wetlands, resources, a standard language that was in the exclusion prior to that?
Right. The ordinance requires that each detached lot have a minimum of 10,000 square feet of buildable area that does not include RPA, wetlands, and steep slopes.
Okay. And the status of the change that's going on to bring the requirements in consistency with the multiple use zoning, you know what the status of that is?
Mr. Bullis, we have prepared a draft amendment. It's the entire subdivision ordinance, and it's currently under county attorney review.
I don't have any other questions.
Kim, on the private alley, are there any proffers about no parking or in the alley? Has the public safety commented on any of that, or?
There were no proffers related to it.
Are they going to allow parking in that alley?
It's pretty narrow, and these will
Right.
actually be private access easements, and so I imagine that there could be no parking signs on there, but they would be maintained by the HOA, but I don't know that for sure.
So do we know if, the public safety has commented on that at all? Do they have a concern with that, I guess is my
They
question.
haven't raised that as a concern as part of this preliminary plat. That could be looked at in greater detail when they come in with their site plan.
Okay, I think that's important, and I guess my greater question is, are they going to be able to use that, or will they have the need to use that in case of an emergency or something like that? So,
Any other questions? Then this plat is up for approval, and the chair will entertain a motion to recommend its adoption, or approval rather. Is there such a motion? I would like to make
So
this,
moved.
it's in my district, but thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion's been made and seconded, seeing no further questions. Let's proceed to a vote. A vote yes recommends, or rather grants the approval of the plat. It is unanimous. Thank you very much. The next item is a public hearing, R140013, related to the retreat at Chancellorsville North.
This is a request to amend the approved proffers for rezoning case R410, the retreat at Chancellorsville, which allowed for a residential retirement community. The original project included 294 age-restricted residential units on one portion of the property and a 500-bed assisted living facility and a place of worship on the northern portion of the property. The previously approved proffers prohibited single-family detached and attached units on the portion of property for the assisted living facility and the place of worship. The applicant has proposed to add age-restricted, detached, and attached units as permitted uses on the property, together with other amended proffers regulating its use. Here is a zoning map which shows the subject property outlined in red. You'll see the entire area that's highlighted here in purple was part of the original zoning. The age-restricted residential development, which is called Regency at Chancellorsville, is located right here. It's currently being developed by Toll Brothers and has recorded 174 lots to date. The area here to the north is obviously what's subject of the proffer amendment tonight. This is what was approved for the assisted living facility and place of worship. Development has not moved forward on this portion of the property. The applicant is requesting the amendment to allow some flexibility with the development and better be able to respond to market conditions. The applicant has identified this area as Retreat at Chancellorsville North. Here is the aerial photo of the property from 2010. You will see the property does have some frontage on Spotswood Furnace. Here's the generalized development plan provided for the Retreat at Chancellorsville North. You'll see a 25-foot transitional screening is shown along the perimeter of the property and is highlighted in green. Also shown is the spine road through the property, highlighted in blue, which will ultimately connect to Lee's Command Boulevard, right here. Lee's Command Boulevard is the entrance road for the existing Regency at Chancellorsville development. Lee's Command Boulevard is accessed from Quarter Avenue, which is kind of off the map here, which leads to the signalized intersection at Plank Road. The spine road through the Retreat at Chancellorsville North does connect to Spotswood Furnace Road. However, this access point is restricted. Should the property be developed as an assisted living facility or place of worship, only the employees of the facility and the church would be permitted to use this entrance. It would be restricted by a gate. Should the property be developed residentially, it would serve as emergency access only. So the main point of access for this development will be through Lee's Command Boulevard to Quarter Avenue at that signalized intersection. The GDP does not show proposed lots or improvements. However, the proffer statement that's been submitted does restrict the number of age-restricted residential units to 192, and the assisted living facility remains limited to 500 beds. The density limitation allowed staff to analyze the project from the standpoint of its greatest impact, which was the 192 detached units. From a traffic standpoint, though, the scenario with the greatest impact was actually the 500-bed assisted living facility and church, which had already been approved. The applicant contributed with the original rezoning $140,000 towards transportation improvements, including that traffic signal at Quarter Avenue and Plank Road. Given the signalized intersection at Quarter Avenue and Plank Road and the fact that Spotswood Furnace Road access point is restricted, no transportation or traffic concerns were raised as part of our analysis. The previously approved proffers for this property remain in place. This includes dedication of right-of-way, age restriction, the access restriction on Spotswood Furnace Road. The substantive proposed amendments to the proffer statement relate directly to the language prohibiting the detached and attached residential uses. The proposed amendment allows detached and attached residential uses in addition to the assisted living facility and place of worship, so they still could move forward with what was originally approved. The proffer limits the residential units to no more than 192, the assisted living facility to no more than 500 beds, or a combination thereof not to exceed 500 either beds or lots in total. The cap of 192 residential units was established as it is consistent with the future land use map designation of low-density residential, which is 4 units per acre, and the density is also consistent with the neighboring Regency at Chancellorsville development. It's important to note that the applicant has indicated that realistically only 110 single-family detached lots could fit on this property. There's a great deal of environmentally sensitive area, which limits the amount of buildable or developable land. The applicant chose to set the cap at 192, though, to allow some flexibility during the development process. The proffer amendment also commits to establishing an HOA, which will be responsible for their pro rata share of the maintenance for Lee's Command Boulevard, the private streets within the development, as well as any recreational facilities. Here we have the capital facility fiscal and economic impact analysis. The analysis was based on the scenario with the greatest impact on county resources, which, as I mentioned, is that proffered maximum number of 192 age-restricted detached lots. The first table you see is the capital facility impact analysis. Based on the existing transportation infrastructure and the fact that this will be an age-restricted development, staff subtracted the transportation and school proffer amounts from the total capital facility calculation, bringing it to $5,924 per unit. As you can see, the total projected impact comes to $1,137,408. This accounts for the fire rescue, libraries, parks and rec, general government, judicial services, law enforcement, and solid waste. The applicant has not provided any cash proffers as part of their mitigation with this project. The second table is the fiscal analysis, which again was based on the potential 192 age-restricted detached units. Staff estimated the value by using the average assessed value of homes in Regency of Chancellorsville, which is $317,160. You'll see that the annual projected benefit is $540,377, which will offset the expected impacts on public facilities within 3 years. Please note that this number is actually different than what was included in your staff report. We found that there was an error in the model. The third table here is the economic impact analysis, which projects the impacts the development will have on the local economy. You'll see there's 295 jobs that are anticipated with a total construction economic activity of more than 51 million. The addition of detached and or attached residential lots in this area is consistent with the existing development and may even be better suited than the 500-bed assisted living facility that was approved. The proffered unit cap of 192 is consistent with the future land use designation, as well as the adjoining development of Regency at Chancellorsville. The applicant is maintaining the 25-foot transitional screening along the perimeter of the property, regardless of how the property develops. The entrance on Spotswood Furnace Road will remain restricted regardless of how the property develops. Additionally, the existing transportation infrastructure can accommodate the development, whether it's solely a residential project or the assisted living facility or a combination thereof. The projected fiscal benefits of the detached and attached units in any of the potential development scenarios will offset the expected impacts on public facilities in accordance with the board's policy. The original rezoning did not include cash proffers, but a $140,000 cash contribution was made towards transportation. At that time, the by right development of the property was more intense. It included a commercial component, so it was actually considered a downzoning. And of course, with the original rezoning, significant historical property, known as the First Day of Chancellorsville Battlefield, was eliminated from that original rezoning and is now held by the Civil War Preservation Trust. The proposal is consistent with the intent of the Planned Development Housing District, the surrounding land use, and the comprehensive plan. The projected fiscal revenues are anticipated to offset those impacts within 3 years. The board adopted a policy that if fiscal revenues of the development are projected to offset expected impacts on public facility costs within 30 years, that aspect of the proposal shall be viewed favorably. Therefore, staff recommends approval with the submitted GDP and proffers dated May 5th, 2015. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions.
Kim, the $140,000 cash proffer was made, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Could we go back to screen 7, slide 7? Just I think that the narrative that you provided, which was accurate, is not entirely reflected effectively in this slide. I don't dispute that there's anything wrong with the slide, but in the future, if there could be something that did reflect the fact, I mean, you make a point of having the difference showing of 1,137,000 showing up in bright red, but the fact that there's a 540,000, that should either be green or there should perhaps be some kind of quotient there that indicates that that covers the 1.137 million in some period of time. Somebody might look at this and think, oh my gosh, this is really a bad thing if they were in a hurry. That's my only comment. Any other questions?
From a planning standpoint, is there any, I'm going to say policy issue or concern with the flexibility that they've built into this? Build this, maybe build that. Do you have any concern, Wanda, moving forward?
No, not necessarily, as long as it fits with the area. Whatever comes in the end will need to meet all codes and ordinances, and they do have in here some remaining proffers, such as that 25-foot buffer, no matter how it develops. Of course, if this developed as single-family detached homes, that transitional screening would not be required. So they've built in and kept in some additional mitigation as well to ensure that whatever does develop is appropriate for the area.
Any other questions?
I just have one. Maybe I missed this somewhere. What we're asking to do is is it going to end up with fewer houses being built, residential units, or how does that work?
What they're entitled to do now is only an assisted living facility, a 500-bed assisted living facility, and a place of worship. And the proffers with the original rezoning actually prohibited them from doing any residential on this portion of the property. So the proffer amendment is to allow those detached and attached units as permitted uses.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I have a question. The financial analysis, did it include the tax benefits from meals taxes, sales taxes, that kind of stuff?
Yes, sir. That's part of our fiscal analysis. That's the 540,377 number. That includes that.
Thank you.
Any more? Thank you. Then shall we hear from the applicant?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. My name is Mike Jones. I live at 6300 Cannon Ridge Court in the Cortland District, and I'm here representing the Tri-Court companies tonight. First, let me say thank you to staff for all the hard work that goes into tonight and making a fine presentation tonight. I do want to say I think this is a unique request. It's not often that a developer comes to you and asks for approval to build fewer housing units than are currently approved to be built on the property, but that's really exactly why we're here tonight. The property in question is approved to allow for 500 housing units. And the term assisted living facility was used, but the way that's truly defined, that could be apartments, it could be condominiums, it could be a lot of different forms of assisted living. It could be a nursing home. And so I don't want to be limited by the preconceived idea that some people might have of what that means. We feel like detached homes or attached villas would be a better fit for the area and more in keeping with the adjacent community than the high density that were contemplated over a decade ago. Even with this change, anything that would be built would still be for active adults and would restrict any school-age children. The property would, according to our engineers, would only support about 110 single-family detached homes or up to maybe 192 attached villas. In either event, the result would be a significant reduction in the traffic generated compared to the 500 units, apartments, condominiums, whatever they would happen to be, that can currently be built. It would also result in a much smaller impact to the capital facilities than what's currently we could do by right. And so while the slide indicated a negative number, that should be compared to a much larger negative number that we can do by right. We have talked, or let me say, active adult housing continues to be in demand, and according to the staff's fiscal analysis, there's a net gain of over $500,000 each year to the county if this property is developed as single-family detached housing. We've talked with representatives of the Homeowners Association for Regency at Chancellorsville, which is the adjacent subdivision, and we understand that some of the residents have questions about whether or not we're going to share in the cost of maintaining the stretch of road that we would both be using. The answer is yes. The proffers obligate us to pay a prorated share of the maintenance of Lee's Command Boulevard. And so for all those reasons, I believe that this proffer amendment is beneficial both to the county and for the neighboring residents, and we would ask you to vote to recommend approval tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Very well, then, thank you. That was clear. Let's proceed to the public hearing. The rules for the public hearing this evening are that for people who wish to address the commission related to the application, the little box on the top of the dais will start off with a green light, meaning you have 3 minutes. Now, if you represent a group, you should identify that at the beginning, and you'll be granted 5 minutes. When you have 1 minute left, the green light will turn to yellow. After the full allotted time, it will turn to red, and we hope at that point you will have finished your time. So I call this public hearing to open. Did anyone sign up to speak?
Yes, sir. I have Jim Maynor, followed by Valerie Maynor.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm James Maynor. I live at 12700 Spotswood Furnace Road. Majority of the land on the one side borders the 3 acres that I own. I attended the hearings 7 to 10 years ago where they stressed that there'll be a nursing home and a church on those 48 acres. The first time I heard they had the right to build detached houses or other houses. It had always been stated as a assisted living, nursing home, and a church. And ever since that, the only thing that's happened on that land, and it's grown over. They've been terrible neighbors. We've tried to call them. I'm just concerned what's going to happen when they develop there, but that's neither here nor there. 192 additional houses, detached, undetached. I asked you, anybody driven by Chancellor Elementary School lately, have you seen the traffic jam right there where this current development pulls out there? Have you seen that? It's ridiculous. The light, great, thanks for the light, but let's add 192, 55 active adults. I'm 50. I own 3 cars, okay? I have kids. They're adults. They own cars. Let's add 192 times 3. How many cars are going to be coming out of there at Chancellor Elementary? Another issue I have, when the original thing was proposed, water and sewer. People on Spotswood Furnace Road have been having new wells drilled because their water is going dry. We've been begging for water and sewer. When this proposal happened, we can bring the water line right up to your property, and if you want to hook in, we can talk about it. How about us? It's about time I have another well drilled. We're always told, myself, my neighbors, it's too much of a stress on the infrastructure. I'm just one person. I own 3 acres and an additional 2 acres next door. How about the little guy? Why can't I have some water and sewer? Why can't I be taken care of by my county? These guys, the $140,000, that's not a lot of money. That's not a lot of money at all. It's like they should be paying millions for the damage to the roads, the damage to just the infrastructure. I'm not disputing the numbers, but just the damage to the the infrastructure in general. Most of those jobs will probably not be Spotsylvania residents, so how do you factor in all this gained income that the county's going to get? They're going to be people that come in, develop the resources, and then leave, take their money and run. But you're going to be paying for the water, you're going to be paying for the sewer, you're going to be paying for all that year after year, just not one year, every year. So that's it. I thank you for the consideration. Obviously, I'm against the additional.
Thank you.
I'm for the nursing home and the church, but not more houses.
Valerie Maynor, followed by Nikki Carnes.
Valerie Maynor, 12700 Spotswood Furnace Road. Correction for my husband, it borders our entire 3 acres and comes up, it butts us. So it surrounds us completely. I'll try not to repeat what he says, but I will say that we did have a business along our little stretch of Spotswood Furnace Road, probably 10 years ago, contact the county for business reasons. They needed to increase that water, and they offered to pay to have the lines brought down, and anybody that wanted to tap in could then pay the county to tap in. She was told there was no resources. Hello, here comes Riverbend High School. I'm not against it. All 3 of my kids graduated from it. But this is to say, everybody gets water and sewage, but the little people along that small stretch of Spotswood Furnace Road, it just isn't right. As far as that spine road coming through there, and it's going to be restricted. I attend church. When people are coming out, you got lots of cars coming out of the church, you know, and they're going to come out on Spotswood Furnace Road based on what I just heard. Maybe it's not the 192 houses, but it's from the church. I'm for the church. I'm just saying there's going to be a lot of traffic on Spotswood Furnace Road. And again, with Chancellor Elementary, it's just ridiculous. That's our oldest elementary school, and there's some people that will use any excuse to close that school down, and we don't need any more traffic coming in there that's going to impair that. As far as the 25-foot transition, I guess basically like the trees and buffers and stuff, and it was just said that regardless of development, that was going to be done. That has not been done since day one. We have mice and rats coming through that field into our in-ground pool. We've had the brush grow over into our shed. It's killed our trees. It's ridiculous. I contacted the county. They said they couldn't do anything about it because it wasn't an upgoing development. They could send them a nice letter to suggest that they do something about it. They've done nothing. So I just say that I wish that you would consider the smaller people along Spotswood Furnace Road. We contribute to this community as well. Thank you.
Nikki Carnes, followed by Ronald Turner.
Actually, Nikki Keynes, and I'm at 7405 Brigade Court. I am one of the residents at the Regency at Chancellorsville. I just have a couple points, and one of them is the actual definition of the 192 attached villas. If they are what I used to call duplexes, that's one thing, but if the attached units become townhomes or condominiums, I don't see how that fits into an active adult community's mindset, whereas right now our homes, we have everything we need on one level and everything else is extra, basement and the loft. And as far as the age restriction, right now our HOA not only restricts children under 18 from living in there, but it also restricts the amount of time that even our grandchildren can spend within a year's time. I guess I would ask if the HOA were it to be put into place, would it follow along those same lines, or would it then become different? Thank you.
Ronald Turner, followed by Carolyn Daniels.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ronald Turner. I live at 7401 Brigade Court, which is part of Regency at Chancellorsville. Under the original General Development Plan, recreational facilities were included for Regency at Chancellorsville, the max 294 age-restricted single-family community. Those facilities are in place now, but they're extremely limited in terms of the size and their ability to accommodate the current community. I'm concerned that under the amended proffers for Chancellorsville North, I saw no accommodations for recreational facilities. I want to be assured that the use of the current limited Regency facilities where I live will not be extended for use to Chancellorsville North unless there is a long dialogue with the current Regency homeowners. Thank you.
My name is Carolyn Daniels. I thank you for your time and I was concerned about the RPA buffer. I don't see it listed in the new proffers at all, and I just want to make sure that that's going to still be in place.
I have no one else signed up to speak.
Thank you. Did anyone else wish to address? Please come forward and state your name and address. And anyone else thinking that they might want to, please do. Next.
I am Richard Horseman, a resident of the Retreat, 7404 Lee's Command Boulevard. I just wanted to point out that Tricord, the owner here, was once the owner and the developer in the Retreat. They failed. That is why Toll Brothers is in there right now. If they had a plan that called for a nursing home and a church, that too now has failed, and they stand before you changing again with a plan that is not crisp. Far from it, it is very fuzzy. It is hardly something to be able to plan on. I submit to you that at least that part should be redefined more exactly with a lot more show cause with it. I also would like to point out and support what other people have said, that that segment of quarter right beside that school is about a half a block long. And to have it flooded at peak times during that school is very dangerous. I'd also like to point out now that a lot of the people, that the parents delivering and picking up children, park along that side of the road during that time. So that's one thing to be considered. It is a segment of road that is going to be sorely taxed during peak hours with traffic. Thank you.
Anyone else?
My name is Chuck Watkins. I'm at 7409 Brigade Court, property that directly abuts Retreat North. I thought the proffers were confusing in the sense of this formula of one bed equals one housing unit, and the limit of 192 would seem to allow a assisted living facility of 308. And I understand from subsequent discussion that if they were to build the 192 or the 110 detached units, that there would be not sufficient property for the assisted living facility. I just want everybody to understand that clearly. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sue Newbern, and I live at 12523 Regiment Lane, which is also part of the Regency property. I had a couple of questions and concerns that I had that I didn't see mentioned anywhere in the process this evening. One of those things was, is it possible that we can have drawings of the proposed homes that are going to be built from this builder's perspective? I think that would be important that we have some idea. Are they townhouses? Are they detached properties? Are they duplexes? All of that makes a difference. The other thing I would like to have a consideration for is the length of time necessary to discuss these matters. I think we had something like a 10-day notice that was mailed to us prior to this meeting. hardly enough time for us to even get together and figure out exactly what our concerns were. Most of us have done it individually. So I know there are limitations, there are regulations concerning these things, but before something is approved, I would like to ask that we have adequate time to consider everything we need to consider and the impact on our lives. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Tom Weckluck, 12521 Regiment Lane, also in Regency. I guess I'm a little confused because I see a lot of numbers bandied about, but they seem to change when you're talking about pluses or minuses on this thing. We're from 192 at 110, 500 beds equals 500 units. That doesn't make much sense. You know, if I look at this thing and I say 110, what is the economic benefit for you with 110, not with 192? How long is it going to take for you to get that economic benefit with 110? So I'm also a little concerned about the traffic. I know that's been glossed over a great deal, but we have about 292 homes going in, plus the construction. They're now going to have homes going in, plus the construction. So we have one little stretch there where there's going to be a great deal of traffic, and I'm a little concerned.
Thank you. Anyone else?
So my name's Judy Clem, and my husband and I recently moved into Regency at Chancellorsville, and our home is adjacent to the, I guess would be the southern end of the property that you're discussing. Behind us, there is a stream, and in looking at the diagram that was up earlier, it didn't show any sort of buffer along the stream area, and I would like clarification as to whether or not that would be considered a protected area. The other issue that I had was the discussion about 500 beds versus 192 beds, and the lesser impact of the 192 beds. In my way of thinking, 500 beds in assisted living have far less impact on traffic. Those people don't do a lot of driving, as opposed to 192 individual homes where 90% at least of those people would have at least 2 cars. I'm certainly not a planning person, but it does seems to me that it would be a consideration. And when the gentleman, Mr. Jones, said that 500 beds versus 192 beds was a reduction, but not necessarily when you're looking at the traffic issue and the impact of those facilities and what it would have on that whole area. And I just would like you all to consider those possibilities.
Ma'am, could you state your address, please?
Yes, it's 12712 Cavalryman Court.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Very well, then we'll call this public hearing to a close. I really appreciate the questions, and we'll hear from the applicant to answer a number of them. One of the comments that was made moments ago about not being a planning person. Well, I guess I'm not a planning person, but I play one on TV from time to time. And the interesting thing about I did learn this in a recent review of having an assisted living facility as part of the Jackson Village project. And theirs wasn't quite 500 beds, but one of the things that we often fail to take into consideration is that to operate a 500-bed assisted living facility requires nearly 1,000 employees. And those employees won't be living there. Now, it just depends on the degree and intensity of the assistance that's being provided. Just wanted to bring that up, and obviously that's not something, because often the residents don't come and go as much as you'd think. Also, someone asked a question about the timetable and not having but a few days to get here. To clarify, this public hearing is for the Planning Commission, and the Commission only makes a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors related to our findings and review. So you'll have an opportunity again between now and the Board of Supervisors hearing, which will be, I would guess, sometime toward the end of next month. Wanda? At the earliest?
Yeah, it would probably be the second, well, it could be the first meeting of the month, but next month, yes.
It's going to be several weeks, and so you're encouraged certainly to learn more, and in between now and then, hopefully, a lot of these questions that will be answered. So in the meantime, let's hear from the applicant related to some of the questions that were raised.
There were a lot of good questions brought up. It's easy to understand why folks would be confused about some of these points. Let me maybe clarify something by going back to the original rezoning and the definition of assisted living units and why we use the term beds versus units. There was an expectation that in a facility, or not just a facility, but a campus of that size, you would have folks of a number of different age ranges. One of those at the very end would be a nursing home. It was anticipated you might have a small nursing home. And the problem came because we knew we could have apartments or townhomes, or not townhomes, apartments or condominiums or higher density structures with a lot of different forms and levels of care. Well, the question that was raised at that time was, if you put in a nursing home, how do we count those? Because that's not a unit. And so what was decided between staff and ourselves is that we should identify beds as a unit. So if we put in a nursing home with 50 beds, that would count as 50 units. And so that's that term, that's where this is coming from. It was never anticipated that this would be a 500-unit nursing home or with 500 beds per se, that type of facility. That's never been what this is about. That's not the definition of assisted living facility. But with that thought in mind, let me go to traffic for a minute, because I've heard that a number of times. The traffic, according to the traffic engineers, when they do an assessment comparing the what is built in a typical assisted living facility versus the units that we're proposing, it would reduce the traffic over 70%. We're happy to share the results of the traffic study. I think the misunderstanding is thinking that the single-family detached home, they're going to have 2 cars, and that the assisted living facility units don't have cars. That's not correct. The very oldest may not, but the average folks in those facilities of that continuing care do, and they often have the same number of cars as the folks that live in the Regency at Chancellorsville next door. And second, in regards to the buffer, the 25-foot buffer, the comment was made that it hasn't been built. We're not really enabled or required or able to build that until the property is developed. And so that the property's never been developed, and that's why there is no buffer. It's all the natural vegetation at this point. I heard the comment that if it were attached townhomes, they would not fit in. When we say attached units, when townhomes, if you want to call them that, are done for active adults, they're done in a villa style. They don't want to be climbing stairs, and so there's some very nice projects around the country that have single-floor villas. They're actually legally townhomes. They're attached in that sense, but they're really quite nice, can be done very beautifully. We don't know that would be what's done, but obviously the market's going to demand that what's done there fit in, or it's not going to allow us to do it. In regards to the shared amenities, this is a separate piece of land, separate ownership. There is no way that anything, our residents would never have the right to use their facilities unless they were to agree. But obviously there's no way without them agreeing that could happen. The RPA buffer, I heard about the stream buffer, the RPA buffer. The streams are protected by the resource protection area, as you know. That's 100 foot on either side of the streams. We're not allowed to develop in those areas. Something cannot be developed, so those areas are going to be protected. There's nothing that we can do to destroy them. I heard the comment that Tricord failed. We don't know that we would agree complete with that. The housing market crashed in 2005, and the lender on this project, part of the financing was we agreed to pay off 50, to develop 50 lots a year, if you will, and the market was simply not doing that. And was able to take the project back because of us failing to produce at the level that they initially required. But we're continuing to be here. We've continued to operate and continue to be successful in all the other projects we've been involved in. As far as what's going to be built, we don't know at this point what that would be. And part of the reason for the flexibility is so that we can try to meet the market that is there. All we're doing is wanting to add the single-family detached or the attached villas as an option. That's all the points that I can remember. If you have any additional questions, be happy to address them.
I think there was one bit of confusion related, and so in other words, would there be a scenario where there might be a smaller assisted living number of units and a smaller number of detached or attached properties? In other words, would this be all on the villas or remain potential for assisted living, or could there ever be a hybrid or a blend?
There could be. That possibility remains open. The amount of usable land limits it. So obviously, if you were to have a nursing home or church, it would greatly reduce the number of either detached homes or single or attached villas that you could have on the property.
Okay, so if I'm in the public, I hear that, and I think there was some allusions to the formula, that obviously there's not a one-for-one formula of one housing unit equals one bed. So how does that, what is the, is there a formula?
Well, the formula, I believe, is that a bed in a nursing home would count as one housing unit.
So if you built 192 villas, then you would still have the opportunity, well, I guess you'd use up all the land if you built all 192 units. Yeah, okay, so I'm learning. There wouldn't be any land to build it, so there would never be 192 units and 308. Okay, I apologize for that stupid question.
It isn't stupid.
Yeah, I was like, what? I'm trying to do the math in my head. But so that the public I hope the public understands it, that in the event that there were 192 attached villas or roughly 110 detached units, that there would never be room for an additional church or assisted living facility.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's fairly clear. The one question that came up was, will there be restrictions in the covenants related to how many days per year grandchildren can stay with their grandparents? Or I guess it was pointed out that under 18 cannot live in the adjoining community. I presume the rules are the same in this one?
I think we've proffered the federal guidelines that govern
okay,
what you can and can't do.
Okay. You can't go beyond. Okay, so again, even though these haven't been discussed, then the neighbors have an assurance that the federal guidelines will be adhered to.
Correct.
And those don't need to be addressed in the proffer. Okay, so if there were a church to be built in this site, how big a church could this be in terms of sanctuary capacity? I mean, is this the type of church that could have 700 members if the market called for a 700-member church, or 1,000?
I think technically it
Physically.
could be whatever land you're willing to dedicate to that purpose.
Right, so it could be, I mean, if there was a desire to build a church there, it could be quite a large church, and the traffic in that scenario would even be beyond what 192 attached villas would create on a Sunday at least.
I guess that would be a possibility.
Yeah. And then earlier I said, I quoted what I recalled as the potential for 1,000 employees at a very dense assisted living facility. Can you confirm or adjust my estimate?
I can't.
It could be that high, though.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
So I'm not going to speak to that.
All right. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, I have one. Can you address the recreation area? There was a question concerning that.
This project, the neighboring community has their own clubhouse and recreational facilities. We have no right to use their facilities. no way we could do that. For this property to develop as active adult, it will logically need its own facilities, but that would be determined by the ultimate use of the property and the number of units. So it would most likely have its separate clubhouse that would support whatever number of units are built there.
Okay, thank you. Do you have I guess I'm trying to figure out, I'd like to know what I'm voting on, and do you have a timeline where you will make this determination on what you're going to be building there? I mean, is it, I understand it's market, but.
Well, as far, we have made our decision. It takes a couple of years to get through the processes, get preliminary plat approval, the engineering done, get construction planning done. We're going to put all our efforts into developing this as single-family detached lots. Now, we'd like leaving the option.
The full number of lots, then the 190?
No.
110?
Actually, our engineers say between 100 and 110. So
okay.
That's where we expect that to happen. There would be no other uses on the property. That's what we expect to do. That's what we're planning to do. But the world can change, and we simply didn't want to close out those other options. But that's the track we're on, and we will move as quickly as we can towards on that track.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I have one question probably for staff. Does staff do a traffic study in comparison to what the previous zoning is for and what they're requesting? And what is that?
Yes, sir. Our traffic engineer looked at this, and based on what was approved, the 500-bed assisted living facility and church, that was more impactful than any of the residential development scenarios that have been put forth.
Do you have any numbers?
Sure. For the 110 single-family detached lots would be a total of 404 vehicle trips per day. The 192 attached, 660. Per day, excuse me. Actually, what is shown here for the church and the assisted living facility was assuming 84 employees and a 250-seat church, and it actually had 483 vehicle trips per day. So it actually would be less than the 192 attached units, but it's more than the 110 detached units.
One more question for the applicant. You're going to pursue the 110? Is that
That
what?
is our intention, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I believe Mr. Stuber probably asked the question, and I think I was having my own vision at that time and missed what he was saying. If you build 110, then that doesn't leave room for the assisted living. Am I correct?
Correct. Take up all the usable land to do that.
Yeah, I guess I'm quiet, and I think, personally, I like to see both. And I'm going to tell you why I like to see both. Because when you do assisted living, where you have villas, villas are beautiful, and they're wonderful, especially when you're retired, all on one floor, as you stated. Sometimes we cannot keep up with villas. And it's always nice to have assisted living beside you. You never have to leave your little village. And so that was the question. That was the reason I asked that question. But I will say that in my district, there are many villas, and seniors enjoy the villas very, very much. I do. Thank you.
Thank you.
So basically what you're saying there is not going to be assisted living there if you build these 110. Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Very well. The chair will entertain a motion related to the application, and thank you, Mr. Jones. Is there a motion?
I'd like to make the motion to approve this.
The motion's been made to recommend to the Board of Supervisors approval of the application. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion's been made and seconded. Is there any other questions or comments?
If I may make a comment.
You may.
My position on this flipped halfway through when I understood what he's trying to do, what the applicant's trying to do. If he builds the 110 units, that precludes all other development. And I know there's a market for it. I know it serves as a need in the community. My parents are in that same market, and that's something I think they would look forward to. And I think it's a fair request that when you go to the Board of Supervisors, that the residents of the Regency have a chance to look at some renderings or something like that to give them an idea of what you're trying to do there. I think that'd be great benefit for everybody to understand the plan. But that, I have my motion and it's seconded, but I appreciate the comment.
Thank you. I would like to comment, too, and remind people that this is merely a public hearing for the proffer amendment as opposed to approval of the final site plans. There's so many things still yet to be done, but I believe this is a good deal. It certainly gives flexibility to the business community, to Tricord. I was disappointed to hear the perception from one of the citizens who described Tricord as failed. Tricord has a wonderful record in our community of providing jobs and housing for thousands and thousands of homes. The circumstances of the past decade are what they are, and Mr. Jones certainly explained a very complex financial situation to the public, and although he certainly didn't owe us that explanation, I believe that this is a really good deal, reflecting the fact that there's going to be so much fewer traffic and the fiscal impact to the county. So with that, did you want to add something?
No, I feel as though that I should withdraw my second. And the reason I feel that way is because that's not my district, and I don't believe that the person who represents Cortland has had an opportunity to second that motion.
It's in Chancellor, isn't it?
There's Cortland here.
Mr. Thompson, it's in Cortland. Would you second the motion?
Okay, I'll second that. Thank you.
Thompson has seconded the motion. I thought it was in Chancellor too. I apologize. Seeing no other questions, comments, suggestions, then let's proceed to a vote. A vote in affirmative for the for the motion recommends to the Board of Supervisors approval of the proffer amendment. It is unanimous. And again, once again, this will go before the Board of Supervisors so that people can get more information between now and that time period to allay their concerns. That concludes this component. The next item on the agenda is a work session related to signage.
Good evening.
Let's
Can I have the floor?
Yeah, let's continue. I was just going to encourage our guests this evening to thank you.
Thank you. This evening's work session is focused on another section of the zoning ordinance update. This one specific to the signage ordinance. Obviously, many of the planning commissioners have seen different amendments throughout the signage ordinance over the years. I would add myself to that process as well. So today's amendments that were up for discussion is a comprehensive review and update of the signage ordinance. As I had stated at a previous work session, many of the signage amendments that we've seen over the last few years have been piecemealed, specific areas, digital signs, temporary banner signs. This is looking at the entirety of the signage ordinance and trying to pull it all together. So with that, I'd like to go through a summary of the amendments, and we also have a policy question this evening that we would like feedback from the Planning Commission. Throughout the course of the amendment summary, first of all, we've introduced a purpose and intent statement. It's just basically an overview of what the signage ordinance is meant to do. The signage ordinance doesn't currently have this. This is very common throughout the course of the ordinance, and we're just trying to make it consistent. We have proposed increasing the temporary sign display time from 60 days, as it's currently defined, to a 365-day period, striking the 60-day limit within the sign temporary definition. Sign temporary under the current the sign code is for a 36 square foot sign allowed by permit. Typically, these are for special event type of situations, and they are permitted. Like I said, currently for 60 days, this would be increased to 365 with an annual renewal. And that was supported and recommended by the zoning office. We've also corrected terminology to refer to the minimum height to setback ratio by clarifying the methodology for measuring the setback in the first place. We have a 1-to-1 ratio for signage, whether they be monument signs or pole-mounted signs, so that they don't collapse into the right-of-way, basically. So the setback is measured from that right-of-way line. We've also relocated the engineer's requirement for signs higher than 35 feet to the special uses section of the code. This is not adding a special use requirement, it's simply reflecting that signs higher than 35 feet have historically required a special use consideration, and we're simply putting it where it's more appropriate within the code. At least that's how we feel it is.
Excuse me, if I may. A 60-day temporary sign to
Yes.
365?
That's correct.
Why is that?
It's a recommendation of the zoning office. Frankly, it has to do a lot with enforcement purposes and allowing more flexibility. That's a recommendation from the zoning office.
Well, I can understand the enforcement thing, but you've taken temporary and made it permanent.
You essentially,
That's a year.
Yes, you have. Like I said, the only thing that would not make it permanent is that is an annually renewable type of permit. So after
They have to
a year's
have the
time.
permit to have the 60 days anyway, right?
Yes, they would. That's currently as it is worded.
And this is only for signs of 36 square feet or larger, or is it a 36 square foot site limit?
This is for one temporary sign no larger than 36 square feet.
And so there's a fee attached to this application? No, only for ones that are registered under this temporary sign.
These are temporary
provision.
signs, yes.
And so they have to file an application and get a permit for it. These aren't like little small 1.5 by 2 foot, small like realtor signs. These are larger, up to 36 square feet.
Yeah, the
6 by 6.
There is no minimum. It's 36 square feet. I would say, though, we're speaking about realtor signs. Realtor signs and auction signs, for instance, are specifically exempted from the zoning office.
I was just using
permit
those as a
requirement.
size
Yeah.
comparison.
Yep.
Excuse me, how
Go
about
ahead.
banners? We talking banners now, temporary?
No.
Put on the side of a fence?
Temporary
Advertising?
temporary signs, as we're talking about this permitted 60-day period, as per the code, I'm reading directly, for the purposes of this section, temporary signs shall not include banner signs. Banner signs are separately addressed within the code. This is something that we had addressed probably 5 years ago already. The banner signs are addressed elsewhere in the code.
I've got to go back to something.
To go back to what now?
To the 60 days to 365. I mean, They say they are allowed. Why are we going to put temporary sign on for 365 days?
Well, a business may, for example, as I understand it, a business may say, for example, that they want to erect a pedestal sign or some other larger sign at some point in the future. For example, there's this one project that was constructed on Route 3 recently that has the an electronic sign on it, and before that was constructed, there was actually a smaller sign where the Driveways by Us building is. That before that sign was there was a smaller sign that would have required a permit, and they would have received that permit because I don't think it was bigger than 36 square feet, and then they would have eventually replaced that. So I think it's temporary, but it gives them the flexibility of waiting up to a year. Now, again, staff is talking about this. This is an amendment draft, and we can talk about if there's some other length of time that would be more appropriate. I'm sure you'd like to hear from us in that regard.
Absolutely. We're certainly open to that feedback. I'd be happy to bring this back to the zoning office as well. I mean, ultimately, they're enforcing this code. The other thing that I would say is, unfortunately, zoning office is not here this evening. However, when we do get into subsequent meetings, public hearing process, we will certainly have the zoning office present as well to additional questions for this.
I suspect.
Well, if it was allowed, it would have said, okay, so we got 365 days, and that's a year. So therefore, if it's already allowed, you don't have to pay for a permit. But if it comes up temporary sign, then you have to pay for a permit, correct?
If the zoning office determines it is a temporary sign, the temporary signs are actually defined, provided it does not exceed 36 square feet, the permit will be required, yes, it would be.
And at what cost?
I would have to defer to the zoning
Okay.
office, unfortunately,
I'd like
on
to
that
know
one.
that.
That's not one of the planning fees.
Okay, thank you.
I'll find that out for you.
But a permit is required for a sign, temporary or otherwise.
With the exception of
what you
all the
enumerated.
exceptions, there's a
Right.
good deal of exceptions as well within the code, and
Right.
I'll certainly get to those as we go through.
I also suspect that these signs have to be designed, they have to be procured, and I suspect that part of the problem is that they can't get that done in 60 days. I mean, there are code requirements for signs, especially the freestanding signs. These are big signs. 36 square feet it requires foundations and designs and approvals, and I suspect part of the problem is they can't get it done in 60 days, is what I suspect.
Yeah, yes, and that's, I
Not to
understand
argue
what-
365
right,
days.
Right, I
Right.
understand what you're saying.
Right.
But our goal is to make things more simpler and to be more friendly.
Right.
Business friendly. And I certainly would like to see some examples, of just what we're talking about and the cost, because I think that's what we're here to look at.
Right.
Okay?
I would like us to even consider deregulating temporary signs altogether. Perhaps, looking at the potential for having a, ordinance that described certain limits, but that essentially didn't require a permit. But we can still discuss that further. That's just my personal preference, and we can talk about that later. I had one on this, while we're on this slide. When you talk about the setback to the height ratio for the setback to the right-of-way.
Yes.
When you say right-of-way, does that mean the actual right-of-way for transit, in other words, the road surface? Or is it the road surface plus so many feet setback that VDOT may have because they're going to have, in some areas, they're going to have a very wide right-of-way that's not paved and some that are.
It's literally from the VDOT right-of-way line, the public right-of-way, so that could be grass, frankly. It could be sidewalk. That would be the setback distance from that public right-of-way.
Well, and so in that circumstance, then, the danger of a falling sign is less. It's not like it's going to impede traffic.
It really depends on the width of the right-of-way. I mean, there are some instances where we have right-of-way, well, technically, you have some lots that the property line comes to the middle of the road, and then that's a real risk. And then there are other instances where dedication of right-of-way has occurred, and you can accommodate a 4-lane road, but there's only a 2-lane road there currently. So there is some variability there.
Well, in reflecting that variability, if at all possible, I think the commission and the Board of Supervisors would, and businesses in general, would maybe like us to have some flexibility in that methodology related to these setbacks, because certainly on Route 3 and other highways, they are pretty far back.
And for that as well, I think I don't know if the county attorneys would have any input on impacts or state regulations.
Yeah, there may be state regulations that would, preclude, any kind of change, but that's obviously something that,
We'll have to do more research.
We'll have to look at. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, just moving on here, regarding digital electronic sign standards. This area of the code has actually been updated a number of different times. However, what we've proposed to do is to move the language permitting digital electronic sign standards from, believe it or not, the prohibited signs section of the code. Basically, the code has been written, and a lot of other localities have the same thing. They prohibit digital electronic signs, but yet within the language, they find a way to actually enable such signs. So instead of confusing everyone, we've moved it to the general sign standard, the general signage code, to permit digital electronic signs. Further clarifying motionless transitions. This is something that did come out last time when we were discussing this, when the transitions were reduced from 10 seconds to 4 seconds. We also proposed establishing nighttime brightness level standards friendly to modern digital lighting technologies. We actually have employed a model ordinance from the International Sign Association that considers the brightness intensity at nighttime. Modern technology allows these signs to auto-dim, measuring ambient light conditions, so they're a little bit less intensive. That was one of the big concerns that we had with digital signs, as opposed to some of the other things that had come up in the past, was just their distraction value in nighttime conditions, especially in rain where there's a lot of glare on the roads.
Excuse me, just.
Sure.
What about if these signs are mounted on vehicles that are moving on the highway? Are we including these?
No, they are not included in this. We are talking about fixed digital signs. We have not addressed automotive-based signage, and I believe that's another one that we can do a little bit more research on, but I believe there's Commerce Act type of prohibition, things that we can't regulate, basically.
I think that issue's come up with localities, so I think there is some law on it. That's something we can look into as well.
The problem is we become more restrictive in one area, business is going to find a way to survive. Okay, I think that's a natural aspect of the free enterprise system, and they're constantly going to. That's why I'm kind of leaning towards the chairman's approach here. I think the more restrictive we become, the greater the problem we develop. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. You're exactly on board. And I certainly hope that we're not going to be more restrictive than our neighbors next door or our neighbors up the road, because, like I said, sometimes we can become unfriendly. Business are going, bang, gone.
Well, I believe that so far in all these amendments that we've just discussed, we are headed in that direction, and sometimes, as staff was pointing out, that this sometimes is complex, because to take something out of a prohibited section and putting it in, well, it's very complex. So removing it from a prohibited signs category is liberating in a considerable sense, and we can address other signs issues accordingly.
I have a question. Who monitors this digital lighting?
Initially, it is reviewed as part of the sign permits that the zoning office reviews. Technical specs are included with the signage permit application that comes through the zoning office. They'll check it against the code to make sure that, there's obviously lighting engineers and all who are stamping these plans. And then after that, if there is a complaint, typically signs are complaint-based things. If a citizen complains, and they do from time to time, the zoning office is forced to review the issue and see if there is an issue or not. And then if a light monitor is required, they'll have to go out with literally a handheld device and check the sign and make sure it meets standards. That's ultimately how it comes down, and again, it's complaint-based.
Thank you.
Well, Mr. Bullock, you have a wonderful one at the fairgrounds. I like it.
One,
And I'm
It's,
sure
it's,
in
it's
Fredericksburg,
4 seconds,
but
by the
it's
way.
nice.
I've already had my complaints.
yeah, on the transitions, this came up on one of my first meetings, and if I recall, I think we approved a recommendation for 6 seconds. Is that a fair statement? Was it 4?
Back to 4.
It went back to 4?
Ultimately went back to 4, and that's the state standard.
Okay, and I do find myself, since that discussion, counting. Every sign I see, I count.
I don't count.
I've been doing it for a year now.
So do you find yourself in that counting being distracted? Are you distracted?
I'm distracted,
Yeah. Sorry.
That's fine.
We've been here a while.
That counting ended up in the minutes from that meeting, too. I remember that. Okay, just moving on. With the nameplate, there's an exempt type of sign allowance for nameplate signs. You don't have to come in for a permit for nameplate signs. What we've done with that, though, is the code for the exemption from the zoning permit requires that it be non-illuminated. We didn't find that that was necessary. We've changed it and allowed them to be illuminated as well. We have co-located the sign auction and the sign real estate standards. We've expanded the allowable sign areas for each, and we've also added a waterway fronting sign provision. Now, way back in 2008, 2009, I know this was a pretty big issue that we had discussed with the Plan Commission as well as the Sign Committee. The amendment never made it anywhere, but we have reintroduced this waterway fronting sign provision for lakefront properties. Properties that may be for sale or for auction, and somebody may be able to see them by boat, frankly, passing by. We've also incorporated window sign coverage standards from a different section of the code. We've expanded a coverage allowance from 20 to 30%. The only reason, frankly, that there is a window coverage standard is based on community principles for public safety. They're considered SEPTED principles, and from a sheriff's standpoint, having at least some transparency within windows is easier to see if there's something going on in an issue within a building, if there's ever a public safety issue. Again, though, we have expanded that from 20 to 30% of coverage on the windows. We've also added a sign A-frame or sandwich board provision. This is something also that in the past had been a very popular idea. As part of a larger sign package, didn't end up going anywhere, but we felt there was value in it, especially in our mixed-use districts where you have walkable areas with commercial on the first floor. So we would allow that as a it's an exempted sign. You can just have that. We've expanded the main entrance signage allowance for multifamily developments to equal those of the single-family subdivision signs. Either way, there are developments. We felt that there was some parity that could be had there. We've expanded the applicability to mixed-use buildings, considering our mixed-use districts that are recently become popular. The mixed-use building standards would fall also along lines of our commercial and office district standards. So we've just added that language. We've also reorganized the section based on sign types for better organization. The way the ordinance had been laid out, and I think it has to do with the fact that there's been so many amendments over the years, you'd have different standards scattered about. You'd have roof standards up at the top of the ordinance and at the bottom of the ordinance, and building mounted standards mixed in, and it was really confusing. So what we've done was broken the commercial and industrial sign standards into building mounted standards, freestanding sign standards, and roof standards. So it's just better organized. We've proposed to add flexibility to first floor signage allowances considering multi-story buildings. Right now, there's an absolute height restriction on signs for the first floor multi-story buildings. The thing is the first floor for the hospital is different than the first floor for just a strip retail building. So that first floor now refers to the band, basically, based on the height of the structure of the first floor. We've struck digital sign language to be addressed elsewhere. As I had mentioned before, we've incorporated that prohibited sign language and we've moved it into the permitted sign area for digital signs. And we've consolidated sign content limitations in the last section of the code there, which basically says the same thing twice. So we struck the duplication and consolidated that. With that, I do have a policy question for you this evening, as well as an update resulting from a board action on the 12th. First, about the policy question. We have a question for the Planning Commission this evening, whether to add provisions for attention-getting or eye-catching inflatables in commercial districts. Unfortunately, this is something I do have imagery about from the zoning office that'll kind of help paint the picture. These large eye-catching inflatables are not currently allowed by the code, and some considerations that staff raised as you consider this may be time and frequency, the size of such inflatables, safety factors such as wind impacts on large inflatables and tie downs, as well as their setbacks from the roadways. Currently by code, this guy right here is not a permitted type of advertising, nor is this large gorilla with the glasses on.
I liked him, though.
I understand.
He ran the corner.
So occasionally what will happen is there will be a complaint. Sometimes it's one business saying, well, I can't have one, you can't have one. So the zoning office ends up having to enforce. We don't have provisions to permit these, and they end up having to be taken down. So the question is whether the Planning Commission does have interest in allowing these. I did contact the zoning office. Their feeling was, at most, we may set a time limitation on them. That can be enforced if somebody does complain. The zoning office can literally see if they're up for a certain amount of time. But without a permit, these would be exempted from permit requirement. It would allow maximum flexibility for a business to put these out. There would be a codified time requirement, so they're not up all the time. But they do oftentimes correspond with sales and seasonal events, so it is a consideration for the Planning Commission.
The city of Fredericksburg, do they allow these?
Unfortunately, I'd have to research that. I'm not aware of the city of Fredericksburg, but I can certainly look into that.
Also, if you were to put any one of these on a vehicle, a trailer, as opposed to real property, how does that change things? Again, I'm going to remind you, these businesses are going to find a way to survive. They're going to get around these things, and I'm wondering if we're creating more of a problem by trying to regulate, because I don't think you can keep up with them. These businesses, some of these businesses are open every single day of the year, almost 24 hours a day in some cases, and the government's not open that often. So, I mean, how often can you keep up with this? And are they going to get around it by simply putting it on a personal property, like a vehicle or a trailer or a tractor or whatever?
Right now, they're not permitted at all.
Right. I don't see how you could restrict it on a trailer that was in some kind of right-of-way, but by the same token, these wouldn't stand up if it were moving air. These are inflated. It occurred to me that both of these signs, the gorilla and whatever this is on the screen now,
Karate guy.
the Karate Kid, both of them require power to inflate them and to keep them inflated. I would be comfortable, I'd like to just throw this out, having them to be permitted without a permit during the business hours of the establishment, or maybe an hour before opening and an hour after closing, something that would sort of coincide with what they're going to use it for anyway. They take these in at night. They don't leave them outside for fear of them being stolen. Any thoughts on that?
I can understand. I mean, the gorilla. He
just like the gorilla.
I like the gorilla. I wanted to take my picture with him, but anyway, I mean, he's back far enough where he's not right out on the road. I think that's good. So I think that is something that we really have to look at. The karate was kind of too close to the road, I think. That's my opinion, for what it's worth. But anyway, and then I believe that you might want to limit the time of how long they will be allowed. It's how many days out of a year that they would be allowed, you know. And I think that's something that we would want to look at.
Also, the county attorney's office needs to tell us if it's mounted on a trailer that's parked on property.
On property.
Yeah, but it's on a trailer, so it's still inflatable.
Or a flatbed of a truck.
A flatbed, whatever you want to call that. I'm thinking, I'm not sure if we are allowed to regulate that on private property. Because it's now personal property, it's not real property. I'm not sure.
Under the circumstances you just spoke of, I would be terrified to think we could do that.
That we could do
That
what?
means to regulate that sign on that man's trailer. That means we're gonna get into a field where we can tell people what they can have on their trailer parked on the side of the street. Could be anything.
Yeah, I don't think we
I
have
think once
any-
it's on wheels, that's that man's personal property. That's the end of that.
I think one of the questions, if it's motion, the guy here, a friend, he doesn't move, he's just standing there. I think the karate guy's moving. I think that has something to do with the vision driving. I think that's got a lot to do with some of these things.
Yeah, they move based on the wind, cutting them down, and they kind of collapse a little bit and then go back up.
Yeah, it's run by electrical, and they go up and down and around. I mean, that's no difference from a digital sign with the car going down a roadway. You take your eye off and look at it. You take your eye off and look at the motion. I think that's one of the biggest problems. But
Maybe the
my
staff.
buddy here is okay. I can tell you he's all right.
Maybe the staff could survey neighboring or nearby jurisdictions to see what kind of direction they're taking on this issue, on the inflatables
Yeah,
issue.
we can certainly do that. We did that with the digital signs and those transitions. We could certainly look for that. Absolutely.
So the issues would be how long during a day they would be allowed up, and how many days a year, and how far back off the transit right-of-ways they would be allowed to be positioned. Are there other factors? I don't think so. Maybe height?
I have seen them on top of buildings.
True.
What is in our ordinance now for the person holding the banner next to the street that is so dangerous to me? You know,
Sign twirling.
you know, that to me is a safety issue because people can careen off the highway in a moment's flash when they're texting, and we've got a mess.
We'll bring a report back on that.
I see that as a larger issue than anything else. And they're getting around it. That's exactly the point. And I'm firmly in the camp of the chairman of, you know, deregulating as much as we can because we are creating a lot of issues. And they're going to outsmart us every single time.
I agree with that statement. It just, I see where we're going with this. They're going to become more absurd until they're just ridiculous if we keep going down this path.
I believe so. I mean, it certainly gives me some more homework. We'll get back to you with that, and I do appreciate the feedback. I do believe it sounds like we're leaning towards, obviously, making these permitted as
Yeah,
you know, without a permit.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm being clear
and-
to that.
But my only concern is the public safety, and I'm thinking specifically the person standing next to the Route 3, twirling it around, just to me it's a safety issue that I'm concerned about.
I agree with you. Yeah, and I will get back to you on those. Lastly, other considerations. On May 12th, the Board of Supervisors directed staff to explore expanding the digital animation transition provisions to allow for moving copy on digital signs. This does seem to somewhat conflict with earlier discussions that we had with the Planning Commission when we were doing digital signs last. I can tell you that through legal review, we've been able to determine that animated transitions are not permitted by the state code. We can't do it if we wanted to. And I don't know if County Attorney's Office would want to chime in and just back me up, or...
You summarized it. It's regulated by the state. You can't have an animated sign visible from the road. And we can't pass any law that would conflict with that.
Well, so in that case, then, if there's a violation of that state state code, does a state trooper come and cite the property owner, or is this, are they then relying upon the building and code administrators?
Code compliance.
Code compliance. Okay. So does the state dictate the fine or the penalties for?
Well, the state would enforce, obviously, the ban in the state regulations. The county would regulate the restriction in the county regulations. But the question was, is there anything that we can do to make it lawful, to allow it to happen through our zoning ordinances? Because you zone to say, what is allowed. If it's not in the zoning ordinance that's allowed, then it's not allowed. So,
so will the new zoning ordinance, which does not, or the proposed new zoning ordinance, will it then say, pursuant to state regulation, that animated transitions are prohibited?
it can certainly cross-reference the state prohibition. It can certainly do that.
So when the Board of Supervisors raised this issue on May 12th, I presume at that time you weren't aware that that was a state thing, and you didn't tell them that that we couldn't?
Planning department wasn't there. That came up under board reports, I believe, at the time, from the supervisors specifically. They tasked the zoning office with determining whether it was feasible through the county attorney's office. So in between this packet being created and now, we've learned this information. So
thank you.
That's where it stands. And with that, I think, we've kind of gone through the entirety of it. If you have any other comments or questions, we could certainly discuss it, but that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Very good job.
Thank you.
One of the sign things that came to my mind as we're contemplating visions of gigantic inflatables on the roof and what have you, when I recall seeing, what do they call them, those aerial lights where, the World War II lights that are spotlights that go up into the sky. I presume those are no longer allowed, or because they really don't say anything, but it tends to attract people to come and look at what's at the thing.
The spotlights are addressed under they're not considered signs under the code. They're considered outdoor lighting. That's a whole nother section of the code. We are looking at co-locating those times or making those available with like special events. And that's oftentimes where you see them, is with special events. That'll be coming up shortly, though. We're bringing that forward.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. Then I presume that concludes our work session. Is there any new business before the commission?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to let you know that the board has asked that the proffer guidelines be brought back before them, so I will be taking them to the board on May 26th. It's an evening meeting, starts at 6 p.m.
Thank you.
And you're also going to be asking about the
Yes,
impact, the fiscal,
the
and how we're going to
30-year
deal with that, right?
Yes, that's part of the discussion, yes.
Okay, that's important. Thank you.
So I believe we said that we would do the closed session at the end. So at this time, we'll just go ahead and complete the public comment section.
That's fine, that's fine.
Okay, seeing no public, I presume we won't have any public comment. So then let's, Chair will entertain a motion to move into executive session.
What I'm going to do, Mr. Chairman, is go ahead and read the motion for you all. It's
Thank
a
you.
resolution. What we would then do is just have a so moved in a second, and then we'll go ahead and vote to go into closed session. So I'll do that now.
Thank you.
Resolution to adjourn. Resolution to adjourn into closed meeting. Whereas the Spotsylvania County Planning Commission desires to adjourn into closed meeting for consultation with legal counsel regarding legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel, specifically the matter of actual litigation and the matter of ATFD LLC and Hazelwild Farm Educational Foundation versus the Planning Commission of Spotsylvania County, Virginia case number CL 15-463, and whereas pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A7, such discussions may occur in closed meeting. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Spotsylvania County Planning Commissioners do hereby authorize discussion of the aforesaid matters.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion's been made to adopt the resolution.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Let's proceed to a vote. It is unanimous that we will proceed into closed session. Do we need to go back to another location, or, okay. Don't go away, we'll be right back.
Turn the resolution for coming back from closed session. Whereas the Spotsylvania County Planning Commission has convened in a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Virginia Code Section 2.2-3712D requires a certification by the Commission that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law, now therefore be it resolved that the Spotsylvania County Planning Commission hereby returns to open meeting and certifies by roll call vote that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion to go into closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting. And I asked the clerk to take a roll call vote. And before she does, can I get a motion? And a motion and a second would be appropriate before the vote.
Is there so moved?
So moved.
Second? Motion's been made and seconded. Let's proceed with the roll call.
Mr. Gustafson?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Aye.
Mr. Newhouse?
Yes.
Mr. Stuber?
Yes.
Ms. Carter?
Aye.
Mr. Bullock?
Here.
Mr. Bullis?
I would ask Mr. Bullock to please.
Aye.
Thank you.
It is unanimous by roll call. Resolution's been adopted. The closed session has concluded. There being if there any additional items tonight? If not, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made unanimously and seconded. Let's proceed to a vote. It is unanimous. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.